Did you know that the moon can talk? That's right. Our moon, Luna, is very chatty, especially with me. She tells me all sorts of things. Like, did you know that she got her beauty sleep from a jar of star jelly? Oh, yes. Luna loves to tell me stories about how she used to sneak out of her jar on the shelf in the celestial pantry and crawl across the ceiling to stare at the beautiful constellations and count shooting stars. Those nights were her favorite, because she'd feel her brothers and sisters watching her from the shelf, waiting for her to return so they could share stories about the night sky and dream about one day exploring the universe outside their pantry. I understand why the moon feels this way, though, because if I were stuck on a shelf in a pantry, I'd probably get pretty stir-crazy too. But it turns out that getting out of jars isn't easy, especially when you're a literal ball of moonlight. So, to escape the pantry, the moon turned to magic, using her silvery glow to slip through cracks and break free. It wasn't long before she became the most beautiful sight in the whole night sky, hanging like a shimmering pearl against the velvet darkness. But soon, she began to notice something strange. Every night when she peeked into the pantry, her reflections in the window seemed weaker, dimmer than before. Worried, she told me everything. And since I'm the keeper of lost moonbeams, I'm pretty familiar with these kinds of problems. So, we decided to investigate. We snuck into the pantry, hopped onto a shelf, and stared out the window into the night sky. As we looked around, we noticed something odd. On one side of the room, the moon's reflection was faint and watery. But on the opposite side, her image shone strong and clear. We hopped from shelf to shelf, watching the difference between her bright side and her dim side. And we realized that whatever was causing the moon's glow to fade was happening here in the pantry. When we looked back at the shelves, we noticed some jars missing. They were small and unassuming, but when we peered inside, we saw that each one contained a bit of the moon's reflection, trapped and fading away. The moon gasped, realizing that someone was stealing pieces of her to make themselves look prettier or stronger or smarter. Each shard of moonlight represented a piece of her power, her memories, and, most importantly, her family. If whoever was behind this kept taking her shine, she wouldn't just lose her beauty, she'd forget who she was. And even worse, her family would never know what happened to her. To stop this, the moon needed to find all the missing pieces of herself, which meant we had to leave the pantry. So I crawled through an opening in the window to the outside, and the moon hid in my pockets while I flew off on my trusty broom. We followed the trail of the stolen moonbeams, which led us to a nearby village. Over the past few days, the townspeople had reported seeing strange lights flickering in the woods at night, and we figured that whoever was behind this was probably hiding there. The forest was dark and foreboding, but luckily I had brought along a few glowstone crackers for light. With each bite of cracker, more light filled my tummy, which I used to peer under logs and search behind trees. Just when I was about to give up, I spotted something shimmering in the distance. I flew over and gasped. Dozens of jars lined the clearing, each filled with a piece of the moon. In the middle, I found another jar that looked different from the rest. This one had a cork stopper instead of a lid. And when I pulled it out, a low voice said, "Looking for these?" I turned around and saw the source of the voice, a woman with skin like bark and hair like vines. She reached out a hand, and more shards of the moon flew into her palm. "Whoever took them didn't mean to cause so much trouble," she explained. "They just wanted to make the world a little brighter." But the moon argued that the only way to fix this is to return her pieces willingly. The woman considered this. "Perhaps we can come to an agreement," she said. "Help me tend the forest and care for my plants in exchange for returning the pieces of me." And so the moon agreed. Every night after tending to the forest, we hid in the woman's house, searching for a way to retrieve the moon's fragments. But it was slow going, because we had no idea how many pieces were scattered around the world or where they might be hiding. Just when the moon started to lose hope, I found a way to speed up our search. You see, whenever a piece of the moon was taken, a bit of her magical essence was left behind in the hands of the thief. And if we could follow these traces of moonlight, it would lead us right to the missing shards. So I took a deep breath and concentrated on finding the closest piece of the moon. Her magical essence felt cold and distant, so I flew in that direction, following her trace until I found a barn filled with the faint glow of moonlight. Sneaking inside, I saw that the glow was coming from a pair of boots. I picked them up and gasped. The moonlight inside was so bright that it hurt my eyes. I flew back to the house and waited for the moon to take the boots, which meant facing the person who stole her magic. When the door creaked open, the moon stepped out, wearing the boots. Then she called out to the forest witch, "I have returned the first piece of my magic, and now I ask for the next." The witch stepped outside and stared at the boots in awe. "But how did you find them?" she exclaimed. "So quickly you shouldn't be able to track the moon shards like this." The moon smiled mysteriously and said, "A little bird told me where to look." She glanced at me and winked, then turned back to the witch. "Now, give me the next piece of my magic, and I shall wear it." The witch had no choice but to comply, so she handed over a bucket filled with the soft glow of moonlight. The moon dipped her fingers in and sprinkled them on her face. As the moonlight touched her skin, it felt like coming home. "Thank you," she whispered, feeling her magic return. "Now it's time for the final piece. Lead me to it." The witch took them to a clearing in the woods where a towering oak tree shimmered with moonlight. As the moon approached the tree, she could feel the last of her magic inside its trunk. But how could she get it back? Well, the answer was right in front of her. Dozens of tiny roots snaked out from the tree and climbed up her legs. When they reached her knees, the moon knelt down and whispered to the roots, "Please release the final piece of my magic." The roots hesitated, then slowly untangled themselves. As they retreated, the moonlight inside the tree dimmed. The moon reached in and pulled out a small root that was glowing brightly. Holding the root, she felt all of her magic return at once, making her feel whole again. The forest witch stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "I am sorry I ever doubted you," she whispered. "Here, take these boots. They still have some moonlight left in them and I don't need them anymore." The moon slipped her fingers inside and felt the remaining magic flow back into her. Then she gave the witch a gentle smile. "You have done well, friend. I feel as if we have traded magic, not taken it. Now, let us return home." And that's exactly what we did. We flew back to the pantry and put the jars back on the shelf. Then the moon looked at me and said, "Keeper, I am grateful for your help. As a thank you, I want to give you a piece of my magic." She closed her eyes and imagined me with a special power. "I give you the ability to fly as fast as your thoughts." And just like that, I gained the power of super speed flying. I zipped and zoomed around the pantry, feeling the wind in my hair and the moonlight on my face. It was amazing. But as I zoomed past the jars on the shelf, I noticed something strange. Each one of them still had a little bit of moonlight inside. And suddenly I understood that the moon hadn't given me a gift at all. She'd saved me from an even bigger problem. You see, when the moon had been trapped in the pantry, she'd used her magic to fill each jar with a piece of herself. That way, even if one was stolen, there'd always be a piece of her magic left behind. But that meant that if all the jars were returned, the moon would lose a part of herself forever. Realizing this, I stopped zooming and flew back to the shelf. Looking into the jars, I saw that each piece of moon magic inside had become a living, breathing being, each with a different personality and a strong will of their own, and none of them wanted to go back to the moon. I tried reasoning with them, explaining that without her magic, the moon wouldn't be herself, but they wouldn't budge. Then they started arguing with each other and the noise was deafening. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the moon appeared at the window and called out, "My children, I am here for you." They all fell silent at once. "Mother," they whispered. "You called?" The moon stepped into the pantry and embraced each of them, soaking in their love and laughter. Then she turned to me and said, "Keeper, Please tell them about the adventures we shared, about how I miss them every night, about how proud I am to have them as my children." And so I did. I told them stories about the time the moon helped a lost firefly find its way home, the time she rescued a baby bird from a hungry cat, and the time she made a wishing well come true. As I spoke, the moon nuzzled her pieces, whispering apologies and promises to do better in the future. And finally, they were ready to go home. One by one, they floated from the jars and back into the moon until she was whole once more. When the moon was complete, she gave me a final thank you and disappeared through the window, leaving me alone in the pantry once more. Suddenly, I heard a loud crash and the entire shelf tipped over, sending all the jars crashing to the ground. But as they hit the floor, they stopped, hovering just above the wooden planks. I leaned closer and gasped. Each shard of the moon was floating, not just any which way, but in perfect alignment, pointing towards the window. Was this the real reason the moon had sent me to find her magic? To show her children that no matter where they went or what they did, she would always be there for them? Well, if that was true, then I knew exactly what I had to do. So I flew over and nudged each piece gently. "Go home," I whispered. "Your mother is waiting." And one by one, they did.